Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the February 3rd, 2020 Land Use Transportation Committee meeting to order. And prior to public comment, I have a motion. My motion is I move to add a new item to the council agenda, or to the agenda, entitled Item 3I, Citywide Adaptive Control or Signal Control Traffic Control Center Authorization of Contract Expenditure Increase.
I'll second that.
Okay, unless there's further discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Councilmember Tran, good to see you. We just added something to the agenda. You okay with that? Go ahead and say aye. All right, okay. All right, we're good.
Did he know that he voted for pizza for the committee?
That's right, okay. Well, now that we got that order of business taken care of, and EJ, you will be doing that after, let's see, 3.
Yeah, so Naveen will actually be presenting it, but that'll be
Oh, Naveen will?
item I, correct?
Okay, all right.
It's adaptive controls.
You know, I think we've got an agenda. I'm going to move it up behind F. We can have a, I hadn't looked at it that closely. Okay, all right, with that business taken care of, we have, our first order of business is public comment. I do not know that we have any public comment. Rebecca? No? Okay. Seeing that there has none been turned in, we'll go ahead and move on to committee business. And the first order of business is approval of the January 6, 2020 minutes. Have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the January 6th, 2020 committee minutes.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Next order of business, the Federal Way Link Extension Station naming. Ryan Medlin will be presenting. Ryan, thank you. You're right on the spot. Good for you.
All right, well, good
Do you have
evening.
someplace to go? I'm kidding.
All right. Well, good evening, Chair Kopang, Deputy Mayor Honda, and the council members. My name is Ryan Medlin. I'm the city liaison to Sound Transit, and I'm here to discuss Sound Transit's station naming process and ask if the council would like to support a name for the future Federal Way Link Extension Light Rail Station in the city center area. So specifically, the policy question is whether the council wishes to support the preferred station name as determined by a public survey that was done through Sound Transit's outreach process for the Federal Way Link Extension effort. To provide some background of it, Sound Transit presented a list of potential names to the public based on their naming guidelines that you see on the screen here. They presented the public with an opportunity to vote, as well as the option to write in a station of their choosing. The opportunities to vote were provided through an online open house that ran from November 13th to December 13th of 2019, and paper ballots were accepted at 2 in-person open houses, the first at November 13th at Highline College and November 20th at the Federal Way PAC. The results of those votes were the Federal Way Transit Center station was the station name that received the highest number of votes, followed by the Federal Way City Center station. Of the write-in votes that they received, the one with the highest number was Federal Way Station with 15 votes. So those were the results of the public survey that Sound Transit executed through their online open house and in-person open houses. So the options that I'm presenting tonight, option 1 would be to support naming the future light rail station the Federal Way Transit Center station in recognition of those results. And option 2 would be to not support the station name and provide direction to staff. The mayor recommends forwarding option 1 to the February 18th City Council consent agenda for approval. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions as well.
Thank you, Ryan. Committee members, any questions on this? It's very, it's very straightforward. In fact, I almost think it's too straightforward. And really, I think not to be at all critical of the participants, we do have more than one station coming into Federal Way.
Correct. And
And I think that this name in of itself could be misleading in that people could get off in Federal Way thinking they were going to be in one place or the other. I think having a more locational specificity to this name it would be an important component, and maybe wasn't one that the voters or participants in the survey were really considering. I would welcome a discussion on this if anybody else has any thoughts. I mean, we are obviously, as a committee members, if the majority says go forward with this name, great, but I'd like to open it for discussion. Do we have any other thoughts on this?
So just for clarity purposes, you're thinking like the Federal Way downtown station, perhaps,
I think
to
some
clarify?
additional specificity
Yeah.
in the location of the particular station, I think, is warranted.
Yeah, I think I potentially could see it, the Mark Copain.
No,
No?
we're not going to do that.
No, okay, just sharing ideas only.
Yeah.
But I think
Really,
like a Federal Way
We want people
downtown.
to come to Federal Way.
Oh,
Okay.
that's a
All
very
right.
good point. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. So I would probably be inclined to say like the Federal Way downtown transit center station, or too many words, too long is what my colleague is saying, which I agree, but I think you're right. I mean, I think we should say something about downtown, because there will be another one south.
Yes.
And so I think differentiating that, I think is going to be critical. I think this also goes to Councilor Trans, defining our downtown a little bit more. And I know that we're doing a lot in that effort, so maybe naming it the Federal Way Downtown Transit.
Number 4.
Well.
Like number 4, absolutely, yeah.
I think, frankly, number 2, I think would certainly address that as well. But Councilmember Tran, did you have any question or any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I would just go ahead with the majority of the people here. I'm fine with Federal Way Transit Center Station.
Okay.
Or the other thing is you can just name after my last name. Just
Okay.
kidding.
Yeah, okay, all right. All right.
Well, we got to start on it, transit.
Yeah.
Transit Center.
And Deputy Mayor, any thoughts on this?
First, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to pull it from the consent agenda. And the reason I'm going to pull it is there's so many questions surrounding Sound Transit and how they do things. And I think if it's just put on the consent agenda with no discussion, the public is going to wonder how this happened, because there sure aren't a lot of people who voted. So I am going to pull it tomorrow. I like the downtown station best because it actually says where it is.
Yep.
But what's the likelihood that Sound Transit would listen to the city council anyway? And when they've named other stations, have they listened to their elected officials in that town?
I can't speak to the complete history. I know they often do seek public feedback through all their station naming, and council feedback is a big part of that. Ultimately, the decision will be made by the Sound Transit Board,
Right.
so I would hesitate to promise that they would listen. But they did ask that we take this to you guys to receive your feedback. So take that for what you will, but this is, they are
Okay.
aware that we're here asking for your input on
Right.
this.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilmember Sefa Dawson?
Yeah, thank you. Because the transit center got a majority, I mean, high majority, more than double of the number 2. It would make sense to do that, but city center sounds much more appealing to me. And then maybe we can already come up with ideas for the next one, which could be South Transit or whatever, to differentiate between this one and the next one. So maybe we can come up with suggestions for Sound Transit to consider for station number 2. But my preference would be number 2, but I also want to honor number 1.
Councilmember Kochmar?
So I'd like to ask, who were the persons that responded? Were there people who came to your events, how did you determine this number of people who responded?
So the online open house and in-person open houses
Yeah.
were hosted by Sound Transit.
That's what I thought.
So the city wasn't involved in the survey process
Right.
directly.
So I kind of like the idea of pulling it and then doing some kind of an online survey ourselves with using all the names and saying, just tell us which ones you like the best and then go from there. I'd like to know what our general population thinks, not just those who are able to go to the transit events. And that way, we get that out to the public. They have a way to respond, and then we can say, well, this is what we think.
I think my only reservation with that suggestion, Councilmember Kochmar, is that the Sound Trans already did that for us. So, yeah.
I know, but it was a limited number of people. I'd like to broaden
I
it.
think the likelihood of us getting more than 600 people to participate in an online survey probably is pretty optimistic.
And that may be, but we would reach a different group of people, those that didn't go to the event or those that aren't plugged in, just a general
All right.
population.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that suggestion. Councilmember Tran.
Thank you, Chair. Seriously, I mean, if we are going to ask all the people to give input to the name of the station, I think we are running the risk that these people actually came to open houses, right? Or participated online. We have got to respect these people because, I mean, they took the time, they went there, they attended the meetings, they participated in the survey, and now we look at this and we say, well, we didn't really like it. We want to give other people another chance to do this. I think there's a real danger here.
Yeah, I think, Councilmember Tran, I think in my comments initially, I'll say them again. I don't want to be repetitive, but I do want to say them again. We're going to have more than one station in the Federal Way. And so to have Federal Way Transit Center Station be the name could be misleading to people that are thinking they want to go, if they're traveling south, to the next transit station or coming north, whatever. I'm just saying, I think that having a locational specificity for the station beyond Federal Way is important. I also think that we have context in that we are trying to create a downtown. We are trying to create a center of commerce in alignment with our vision for, and I know that you weren't on the council retreat, but we did, in our vision, really talk about being a business hub. I think that, again, would be, I think having a name that is more specific, I think is worthy of consideration. Again, we can forward this on. I think this is something that the whole council probably will want to talk about. So I would recommend that we forward it on. Did you have something else you want to say before we?
No, I mean, couldn't we, just for point of clarification for Ryan, and that's, couldn't we make a motion for it to be on the agenda, the business agenda?
Yeah. Well, it'll be on the business agenda.
Instead of the consent?
It'll be pulled, so we might as well just put it on the business agenda.
That's what I'm
anyway.
saying.
It won't be tomorrow, though. It'll be the
The
next.
following, okay.
Yeah.
Chair, can I clarify a couple things?
Yes.
We're all here.
So one, just to make sure we're all on the same page, this is not on the agenda for tomorrow, it's on
Right.
the agenda for the 18th.
Yes.
And then second, just to be very clear, Ryan is a city employee, not a Sound Transit
Yes.
employee. I've heard a couple statements that Sound Transit implying Ryan was involved in this. Ryan works for the city and is our liaison, not a ST employee.
Hold on a second. All right,
So can I-
good. Well, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Kochmar.
Thank you. I just want to
Stefan Ross will
clarify.
be next.
So I just want us to think about this, whatever y'all decide is fine. I don't have any game, I don't really have
Sure.
that much of a skin in the game. But if you do go ahead with number 2, you're really agreeing with 125 people out of the entire population of Federal Way. And so I'm just pointing that out.
Councilmember Kochmar, I think I don't think there's going to be a recommendation other than to consider the names, unless we decide, and again, this is a committee. But Councilmember Sefadasan, did you have any additional thoughts?
Again, back to Transit Center, we do have a transit center, so I think that would not be misleading, because that's where it's going to be at anyway. So I don't see any problem with
I'm sorry, the transit center.
the transit center. It's right there, the bus transit center. That's what it's called.
Yeah, that place is already called the Transit Center,
Yeah.
Federal Transit Center.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be misleading between this
Oh, okay.
station and the
Got it.
next one, is what I'm
So
trying to say.
basically, but you'd have two facilities right next to each other that have the same name.
Right.
Okay.
Won't it be
No,
one
it-
facility at that point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be
It's not
one
gonna-
large
yeah.
facility, not two separate.
All
So
right.
it's keeping the historic name is
Well,
what they're
then,
proposing.
okay, good. I think, any other thoughts? Well, we've already got, like you said, it's one big name, it's already named that way. I think that probably is why the vote was the way it was. Okay,
I think I'm just gonna go ahead and make the motion
go ahead.
that I move to forward option one to the February 18th, 2020 City Council business agenda for approval.
Second.
Good, I'll second, good. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, thank you. Good discussion, appreciate that. Okay, next we go on to the horizontal curve warning signs, 85% design, report and authorization to bid, and that's John Mulkey.
Thank you, Chair
Thank you,
Copain.
Ryan.
My name is John Mulkey. I'm a senior capital engineer for the City of Federal Way, and I'm presenting the horizontal curve warning signs, 85% design report and authorization to bid. So this is just an example of just what the kind of signs that we're going to be installing around the city. So the policy question is, should the city council authorize staff to complete design and bid the horizontal curve warning signs and return to LUTC and council for bid award, further reports and authorization? Financial impacts, this project was included and is projected to be completed within the approved budget of Capital Project 218. And it's funded by a FHWA grant in the amount of $519,700 and the remainder in miscellaneous capital streets funds, which is MVET and REIT. Upon completion of the project, ongoing costs associated with the operation and maintenance will be performed and funded through traffic sign maintenance. Funding requirements for operation and maintenance of infrastructure is reviewed and adjusted as required during the budget process. So the project will collect data, determine and install the appropriate signage to upgrade to current MUTCD standard curve warning signs citywide. And currently the project design is actually 85% complete. And we've completed our ball bank studies, determined the appropriate signage. We've put the plans to 85%. We've gone through our specifications. And our ongoing tasks are just to bring the project design and plans and specifications up to 100%. And so funding expenditures, so a ball bank study designed by consultant, 2020 construction costs, construction contingency and construction management total $521,520. And available funding with our federal grant and our street capital funds with MVET and REIT makes a total of $524,300. So right now we're showing a surplus of $2,700 on the project. So after receiving bids, the total project cost will be refined and presented to the committee and council for bid award authorization. And staff anticipates bidding this project in March, and construction is anticipated to start in spring 2020 with an estimated substantial completion date in the summer of 2020. So options considered are authorize staff to complete the design and bid the horizontal curve warning signs and return to the LTC and council for bid award, further reports and authorization. Or two, do not authorize staff to proceed with this project and provide directions to staff. And the mayor recommends forwarding option one to the February 18th, 2020 City Council consent agenda for approval. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, John. Committee members, any questions? Council members? All right, hearing none. I have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to forward option one to February 18, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
I will second that.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, next is the 2020 Planning Commission Work Program, and Margaret Clark. This is your last LUTC meeting, isn't it? Yes, you will be missed. I know we are looking forward to celebrating your career with the city at some point in this month, but for the members of the community that don't know, Margaret is retiring, and we're very pleased for her. We are going to miss her and her experience, though. But Margaret, with that introduction, if you would like to discuss the Planning Commission work program, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Kopang, members of the LUTC, Deputy Mayor Honda, members of the City Council. I'm Margaret Clark with the Community Development Department. So this evening, I'll give you a brief presentation on the 2020 Planning Commission work program. The policy question is, what items should the 2020 Planning Commission work program contain? As you know, the Planning Commission's work program is approved every year by the City Council. This evening's presentation will cover items completed in 2019 and then the proposed 2020 Planning Commission work program. What we completed in 2019 were amendments to the Shoreline Master Program and the Environmentally Critical Areas Code. The Shoreline Master Program is updated every 8 years. The City Council approved a comprehensive plan and zoning amendment for approximately 56 acres in the Milton Road area south of Wild Waves. And that the zoning and comp plan went from RS 35, which is 1 unit per 35,000 square feet, to RS 7.2, residential, 1 unit per 7,200 square feet. They also approved a comprehensive plan amendment to realign the future extension of South 324th Street further south to connect with Warehouse Road South, and this is east of I-5. And the reason for that comprehensive plan amendment is that the alignment of the road before it was changed would have split the Vita campus. So the types of code amendments that we'll cover tonight are housekeeping code amendments, which are simple code amendments, which should be done fairly quickly. Then the non-housekeeping code amendments are more complex and will require more research and take a longer time. And then we've got a category called on hold, and those will require very substantial work. So I'll start with the housekeeping items. The first one is to amend the language requiring the city to issue a threshold determination within 90 days of a complete application. And all 4 of these amendments right now are in process. And they'll be going to the Planning Commission very shortly for a study session. The reason for this first code amendment is that for very complex projects, it's very difficult to meet this deadline. And furthermore, we are a city planning under the Growth Management Act, and we're not required to meet this 90-day timeline. Secondly, clarify under what conditions tracts are considered lots. State law defines subdivisions as containing both tracts and lots, and that gets a little confusing because the tracts that are in subdivisions are normally what's called public purpose tracts for like open space or drainage, and if we count those tracts as lots, then potentially we can have like an eight lot short plat and 2 tracts become a long plat. And short plats are reviewed administratively and long plats go to the hearings examiner for a public hearing. So what we're proposing is to clarify that public purpose tracts should not be counted as lots. The next one is requiring noticing requirements for short plats to be the same as for long plats. When the subdivision code was first written, short plats was up to 5 lots, and then over 5 lots would be long plats. Since that time, we've lifted the threshold where up to 9 lots are considered a short plat and more than 9 long plats. And potentially a 9-lot short plat can have some impacts on the neighborhood. So we are proposing that all property owners within 300 feet be notified, same as for long plats. The next one is to address the double notice requirements for administrative variances. Administrative variances go through what's called a process 3, which requires a notice. And then when we had brought the administrative notice variance amendment to the council, I believe it was Councilmember Burbidge recommended that we have a second notice. We think that's overkill. We think that just 1 notice is enough because that goes to every property owner within 300 feet. Address family daycare with reference to state requirements. What state law says is that we cannot treat family daycares differently than a single-family home. And in our code right now, we require, this is just an example, we require non-conforming family daycares to go through what's called a process 3, where we don't require that for a non-conforming single-family lot. So we propose to make our code the same as state law. Clarify that split zoning is not permitted as a result of a land use action such as a binding site plan, boundary line adjustment, or subdivision. That, if split zoning makes it complicated, because I'll give you an example. South of 356th Street, west of Pacific Highway, we've got a number of lots that have OP zoning along the frontage with suburban estates behind the OP zoning. Suburban estates is 1 unit per 5 acres residential, and OP zoning, of course, allows offices. So if somebody comes in to develop that lot, what zone should we use? Should it be the OP? Should it be the SE? So we want to make sure that we don't have that split zoning in the future. The next one is to exempt all accessory dwelling units from school impact fees. Right now, the code says that accessory dwelling units that were registered within a certain time are exempt from school impact fees, but others aren't. Accessory dwelling units are affordable dwelling units, and usually they're between 300 to 800 feet, no more than square feet, no more than 2 bedrooms. You're normally not going to find a lot of children living in accessory dwelling units. And the school impact fee for accessory dwelling units right now is over $5,000. So we would recommend that we exempt all accessory dwelling units. Non-housekeeping items, the first one is to continue research and amendment to the code addressing demand for housing, including for multifamily housing. This will be part of the Housing Action Plan. Doc, I believe, has presented to you that we received $100,000 from the Department of Commerce, and $80,000 of the $100,000 will be used to hire consultants. It'll be a group effort amongst the South King County cities. And this will be just a continuation of what we did when we went through the multifamily moratorium back in 2016. The next one is to address allowing RVs as an accessory living facility only if it has cooking and sanitation facilities as provided in state law. Our code allows living facilities for some commercial uses, sort of for like a watchman to live there. So this would allow RV to be used as a living facility. The next one is to address distinction between convalescent center and special needs housing. Right now, we really don't have good definitions for senior housing. And the trend is that senior housing is now on a continuum. You've got your independent senior, you have your assisted, then you have your convalescent. We were proposing that we come up with very clear definitions of each of these terms. The next one is to amend the language of the sign code to make it content neutral in response to case law. Case law says that we can only regulate the location, the size, and the type of sign. It doesn't allow us to regulate what the sign actually says. So we propose to make our sign code consistent with case law. The next one is to provide a plan to address the new transit station in the south end of the city, which will be constructed in 2026 and operational in 2030, including a public participation plan. We really want to get the public involved in planning that station. The next one is to review height, bulk regulations, multifamily requirements, parking in transit areas, design standards, and review of view corridors. What we anticipate happening is the closer the transit center in the downtown comes to completion, we'll have a lot of interest in developing in the downtown. So we want to be ahead of that by coming up with some better standards. The next one is research amendments regarding criteria to allow cottage housing. Cottage housing is actually allowed in our code as a demonstration project. The only cottage housing we've ever had is the Mirror Lake housing. And so we wanted to sort of review the criteria again. Okay, now we come to the items on hold. The first one is to amend the subdivision code to address how fee in lieu should be calculated. and address open space requirements in response to case law. Right now, our subdivision code requires that 15% of the gross land area of a subdivision be set aside either as open space or that the fee be paid to the city that's equivalent to the cost of that 15%. What state law, case law says is that we can't just have a blanket 15%. There must be a relationship between how that subdivision code affects the demand for open space. So we have to do it on a case-by-case basis. And we did start this work several years ago, and it's sort of on hold right now. Existing code requires a 50-foot setback for schools with 50 or more attendees. Consider whether there should be a lesser setback for portables. When these setbacks were first set, we didn't have very many portables. And the reason for this large setback is that schools are pretty big and bulky. And if we have a residential neighborhood, residentially zoned neighborhood next door, we want to make sure we protect those neighborhoods. So the question is, should there be a lesser setback for portables, since portables are normally a lot smaller than the main building? Next, implement the Twin Lakes sub-area plan through code amendments which increase the maximum allowable building height and uses encouraged within the sub-area plan. Several years ago, when we were doing what's called it was a health plan, we also had this Twin Lakes sub-area plan. We've got lots of goals and policies, and it's never been implemented. The Twin Lakes sub-area plan actually is around the Fred Meyer area. That's zoned neighborhood business. The maximum height in a neighborhood business zone is 35 feet. We haven't gotten any mixed use because you cannot build mixed use just with a 35-foot maximum height. So we would be taking a look at increasing the building height and also other aspects of the plan. The last item is the 2020 Comprehensive Plan amendments. The first is Kids Corner. This is a request from ESM to amend the conditions of comprehensive plan approval to remove the requirements for a master plan meeting specific conditions for the 19 acres located south of South 336 and west of Pacific Highway. That's east of the wetlands. Your Kids Corner, there's wetlands, and then this would be the 19 acres that's adjacent to Pacific Highway. This comprehensive plan was of BC zoning was adopted with conditions in 2005. One of the requirements was that a master plan be prepared. A master plan was prepared in 2008, but it's a very specific master plan. It shows the location of buildings, what uses would be in those buildings, and after 11 years, nobody has developed that property. What we're finding that there's homeless people there. So the applicant is interested in getting the requirement for the master plan removed so that the property becomes more marketable. The next one is sheltered resources. This is located south of the park and ride, the 272nd Park and Ride. It's for 5 acres behind the Silver Shadow Apartments. And what they would like to do is to get a comprehensive plan amendment for approximately 5 acres, as I mentioned, to go from single-family, high-density residential, zoning of RS 7.2, to multifamily, RM 1800, 1 unit per 1,800 square feet. And they would like to build 150 units. And this is within half a mile of the transit station that will be built at the 272nd Park and Ride. There'll be a transit station there built in the future. And so what King County is doing is they are offering funds to what's called transit-oriented development, multifamily within half a mile of the transit center. So Sheltered Resources has applied to King County, and one of the things they want to do is to build these units. The last one is a city-initiated request to remove the extension of South 376 to 19th Way South in Regency Woods. And that's related to the Milton Road comprehensive plan. When we brought the comprehensive plan to the council, there was a lot of opposition by the residents of Brittany Lane and Regency Woods. They did not want to see that road extended to Regency Woods because they are concerned about increased traffic, increased crime, and there's a tot lot right there. So we were given direction to take a look at that extension and whether it should be removed from the comprehensive plan. So we're in the process of doing that. There's 3 options in front of you. 1, recommend approval of the mayor's recommendation. 2, recommend approval with further amendment by the LUTC, and 3, do not recommend the mayor's recommendation. And the mayor recommends approval of the 2020 Planning Commission work program. The Planning Commission was briefed on the work program last Wednesday, January 29th, and the LUTC's recommendation will be presented to the council at their February 18, 2020 meeting. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Margaret. Committee members, any questions? Councilmember Moore?
Hi there, Margaret. This is my first time as a voting member for this committee, so I'm really thrilled. Thanks to the deputy mayor for that. Can you remind me what a variance means?
A variance? Okay.
Yes.
So there might be a very small lot, and setbacks are 5 feet on the side, 5 feet on the back, 20 feet in the front. If the lot is so small that you can't even get a regular house on it, somebody could apply for a variance. And there's specific criteria that we would have to go through to recommend either against or for the variance to be approved.
Okay, and you're recommending that we, or it's in process, is the status, that the planning commission addresses the double notice requirements for administrative variances?
Right, just have one notice.
Okay, and can you share a little bit more insight into that?
It doesn't really do much. 2 notices, it says the same thing as one.
Okay. Okay, I was just curious. You mentioned that in your report, and I was curious about that. Of course, I'm curious to the former mayor Burbidge, Councilmember Burbidge, Deputy Mayor Burbidge. Clearly, you indicated that she wanted that in there.
She was one, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And I did not work on it, but I do remember her bringing it forward. And
Got
of
it.
course, it was approved.
Okay, okay. Great, thanks for your report, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other council members with questions? Deputy Mayor Honda?
What is the special needs housing versus a convalescent center?
I don't have the definition here.
Would that be adult family home?
No, adult family homes are different. These are senior housing, variations of senior housing.
Okay, I've just never heard that term before, and
Yeah.
so I don't need, if you can eventually let me know, I'd appreciate it. This is a extensive work plan.
Yes.
In the past, as council has added things throughout the year, things have been taken off of the planning commission's work plans. So, does staff think that this could all be done?
Probably not, because all of the ones in process was on last year's work program, so it's been carried over. But we're almost, it'll be going to planning commission soon. All of the research has been done. We'll just be looking to get some feedback. So what happens is, even after the work program is approved, sometimes the council adds other items to our work program, and so other things slip. So as we mentioned in the LUTC staff report, it's sort of like we carry it over from year to year, and I know that's sometimes very frustrating especially you, Deputy Mayor Honda, you've mentioned that before.
Well, it is frustrating, I like the sign code that's been carried over multiple years.
It has.
So eventually, we do need to address that. The sooner, the better.
We did start it. It's in process, but it's kind of complicated, and we were actually advised by the law department that we should hold off on it until other cities adopted the sign code.
And have they?
Some cities have.
Okay. Well, thank you.
All right, any additional questions? Councilmember Kochmar?
Thank you very much, Chair Kopeng. And Margaret, we're really going to miss you because of you just have a wealth of knowledge. And I know that this is a very ambitious plan. And as Deputy Mayor Honda said, I'm wondering, it's extensive. I'm wondering if you have enough staff to do it. So I would assume that at some point we would want to prioritize some of these things. For example, I would like to see the master plan for Kitts Corner to come to the top, because we have homeless people living there, and if they want to develop, that would be, if we could get that to the top of the list, then those folks could develop, I would imagine.
Right. Actually, we are working on the comprehensive plan amendments right now.
Okay, great. I think that, well, I would like to go through this just a little bit. I have just a couple questions that I'll just go through it from the beginning. On slide 4, you were talking about comprehensive plan and zoning amendments for approximately 56 acres in the Milton Road area south of Wild Waves are going to be zoned to 7,200. Now, that would be an average size lot, right?
Yeah, it's just, that's already been approved.
That's already
Yeah.
done. Okay, that.
Those were completed.
Oh, gotcha, thank you, missed that part. Okay, and then, when you say on slide, you're talking about ADUs, but you most likely, you're talking about detached ADUs, so they were 800 square feet or whatever.
Attached and detached.
Okay, so detached ADUs, do you know how many we have already in the area?
I have a list of them.
Could you
I
just
could look it up.
guesstimate? The only reason I'm asking is because I think that's I would really like to see us, as far as density, working on that for our housing population, to provide housing for, the granny pad in the back, or the kids that can't buy yet.
Right, yeah, we do have a good code that addresses it.
Yeah, okay.
And we're required to have a code based on the GMA. So it's there, it's just that more people need to take advantage of it.
Right, and I really would like to see us, because I know it's going through the state legislature right now, allowing for triplexes and fourplexes in residential areas, and I'm not sure where we are with that in our residential plan, in our comprehensive plan.
That would be part of the housing action plan? Or?
So that's something we are looking at.
For the record, I'm Doc Hanson, Planning Manager. Referencing the Housing Action Plan, we will be looking at the statistics for this year. We're hiring consultants. We're
Okay.
in the process of interviewing consultants that are going to give us these numbers and indicate what types of housing exists within the city, including attached and detached accessory dwelling units, and what these laws that you referenced, it's actually at stage 2 right now. I think it's going through hearing next week.
It's probably going to get through.
Or this week. And that could have a big impact upon what happens within the Housing Action Plan. That's something that we will be addressing in the Housing Action Plan and will have before the council this time next year.
Okay, thank you. And so my question too with that, is it going to be mandated, or is it just going to be allowable from the legislature?
From the legislature, the way it reads right now, as I understand it, it's going to be mandated.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. And, it's not a bad thing, because for a long time, we don't have duplexes in this city. They've always gone to big lots, big houses on big lots. And somehow we need to change that trend, because our house prices are going to be going up.
I can go on to this in great detail, but just briefly, that is the trend. I think the law, from my perspective, my professional perspective, is directed towards the city of Seattle.
Right.
The city of Federal Way and the city of Auburn and the city of Kent are quite different than the city of Seattle.
Right.
So we may want to deal with these specifically in terms of the types and how they're beneficial to the particular neighborhoods that already exist, and how they can become compatible. And that's one of the things that we'll want to look at, the Housing Action Plan. The way the legislature is written right now, we wouldn't have a choice.
Right.
You have a single-family lot, you can have a duplex, triplex, accessory dwelling unit. It was written for the city of Seattle.
Right. So one last question I have, one last concern I have really is about RVs as living facilities as part of the action plan, housing action plan. I know that most RVs are self-contained. In other words, you do have your water and your sewage containment. But my only concern would be to have RVs where homeless people would be living in them. I don't want to see the proliferation of RVs around the city.
Right, but in this particular case, it would just be associated with a business that already allows a living facility.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion? You do have another question?
I do.
Sure, okay.
Margaret, and maybe this is questions for Doc as well. I don't know who goes to the planning commissions. How many times does the planning commission meet?
They're scheduled to meet twice a month, the first and the third Wednesdays.
And has that been happening consistently?
It has.
Lately, yeah.
Okay, okay. I don't know, so that's why, I know that was an issue before, but,
Just for your information.
yeah.
We're probably averaging 1.5, and it's really based upon the amount of information and the kinds of things that we're doing at the particular time. If we're making an amendment to the code that are going to be involved here in our work program, we'll be going to the Planning Commission quite a bit, because before we go to hearing, we want to make sure the Planning Commission understands what it is that they're recommending to you in the public hearing. And so we meet with the Planning Commission quite often, but I think whenever we follow the work program, unless we've got some other things to do, we will be meeting quite often.
Okay,
Okay.
very good. All right, unless there's any additional questions, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward option 1 to the February 18, 2020 business agenda for approval.
I'll second that. Okay, you'll second it?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Any additional? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you, Margaret. Next, we have the Seattle SMSA Limited Partnership DBA Verizon Wireless Franchise Ordinance, and Desiree Winkler. We talk about cell phone towers now and all that good stuff, huh?
Good evening, Chair Kopang, committee members, Deputy Mayor Honda, members of council. Yes, I am here to present a new franchise ordinance. Policy question: should the city grant Seattle SMSA Limited Partnership, doing business as Verizon Wireless, a franchise to install, operate, maintain, and repair a telecommunications network consisting of small wireless facilities in, across, over, along, under, through, and below the city of Federal Way? So some background information. Verizon Wireless has requested a franchise in order to install small wireless telecommunications network in the city. The application was posted on the city's website. The term is for 10 years. There's a franchise bond of $50,000. Work will be guaranteed through performance and maintenance bond, and insurance is consistent with city standards and other franchises. So that we know what we're looking at again, and I know we've been here before with other presentations related to small wireless. But there is a huge demand for wireless services. Everybody's moving to 5G technology, and what that looks like is that there's like a densification of wireless facilities, and so these small cells or small wireless facilities, as you see depicted here on streetlight poles, will be placed as those communicate with either fiber optic cable that is underground in the area or above ground where there's overhead, or also, and/or communicate with the macro towers. And that's how you'll get the 5G network deployed. More specifically, if they did it with looking like a streetlight replacement, this is an example of what one of those streetlight poles would look like. There's an antenna on top. There's some equipment boxes on the pole. There may be some equipment as well on the ground. There are some concealment strategies that can take place. A banner is one option. And then, again, it has to connect to the network somehow. So it's either fiber optic cable, or again, it can transmit wireless to a macro tower. The financial impacts are, they have deposited $5,000 to assist in the administrative costs in developing this franchise. There will be a master license if they choose to lease city facilities such as streetlights. There is a maximum fee of $270 per year per location unless the city does a study otherwise to prove that the costs are more. They will also have small cell permits, which are addendums to the master license, and they'll be specific to each deployment. And then right-of-way permits, which will be applied for and paid for the installations. Options considered, recommend adoption of the proposed Verizon Wireless franchise ordinance and forward it to City Council for first reading. Or option 2, do not adopt the proposed ordinance and provide direction to staff. The mayor recommends option 1, moving forward with franchise ordinance adoption, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Desiree, thank you for the presentation. Committee members, any questions? Council members? All right, this is pretty straightforward. This is essentially the same type of agreement we've had in the past. There's no new ground really being covered here as far as this agreement.
No, this is very consistent with other franchises, and as a heads up, you'll see the other carriers coming in. Maybe even next month we'll be here. There's an application in for AT&T's Singular Wireless for the same type of franchise.
Councilmember Moore, did you have a motion? Okay, yes.
I just wanted to say, just remind them that we have no service at the corner of 320th and First or the corner of 320th and 312th for wireless. Just remind them.
Okay.
Okay.
Have you written that down?
We
Just
can discuss so many times. We're all
I'm
very-
ready to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
you. Thank you.
I move to forward the proposed ordinance to first reading on February 18th, 2020 meeting,
Thank you.
council meeting.
Second?
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously. Next, we have the Lakeway Haven Water and Sewer District Interlocal Agreement. And Public Works Director E.J. Walsh will be presenting.
Good evening, Chair Kopang and members of council. So tonight, we are here to briefly talk about a master agreement with Lake Haven Water and Sewer District in the form of an interlocal agreement. And the policy question is, should the city council authorize the mayor to execute an interlocal agreement with Lake Haven Water and Sewer District? So the background is the city and Lake Haven routinely enter project-specific interlocal agreements. You just recently saw one for the Sacagawea Gap project, where there's a mutual benefit to both agencies to complete the work. Usually that benefit is a increase in schedule productivity or a decrease in cost to one or both of the agencies. So we use this to leverage our funding for the overlay program, for example, where Lake Haven's doing work in advance, and instead of them going out and paving one little patch and then us coming back and paving, immediately downstream as part of that project, they pay the city the payment for their section, and then we roll that into the entire project. And when we only have one set of traffic control and only one set of everything else, we can actually leverage the money further and get more work done. That's a two-way street, so we do the same thing where Lake Haven's project, and we can leverage our funding to get more work done. Ultimately, both agencies, it's in the better benefit of all of the citizens. So from a process-wise, we have a duplicative process where we bring projects through council, and then we separately bring an ILA for a project specific, like we did with Sac Gap, also for council approval to enter it because it's an ILA, and that takes the council approval. So the project funding still has to go through council. None of that changes. So the two options are to authorize the mayor to execute an interlocal agreement with Lake Haven Water and Sewer, and option 2 is to not authorize it and provide direction to staff. The mayor recommends option 1, and I'm available for questions.
EJ, thank you for the presentation. I know in our discussion, the other advantage that you mentioned to me was it would save about 40 hours in
Correct.
duplicative work to create.
Per agreement.
Per agreement, yes.
So that's about what we spend when we put together an ILA with Lake Haven between us and law and everybody else when it goes through council. It's about 40 hours worth of work for both agencies that we are doing for basically every single project we do.
But and again, this is redundant, but just to be clear, we'd be saving time
Correct.
and we also would be saving money. And in the process, the council would not be giving up any approval authority.
That's all correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we still have to come to council for budget
Yes.
authority, and the projects still have to be approved by council. So it's a procedural taking out some of the stepping stones to make the whole process a little smoother.
I think as far as continuous improvement is concerned, this is a great step in the right direction, so thank you for that. Committee members, any questions? Council members? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward option 1 to the February 18, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Naveen, we are going to talk about the Traffic Control Center authorization of contract expenditure increase. Okay. This is such a rare conversation for us to have.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah,
And
it
I
is.
think, and overall, I think the project itself is under budget.
Budget, yeah.
But again, it really goes to show how rare this is, that
Yep.
it sticks out a little bit, but that's okay, because the Public Works Department's done a very good job at
Thank you.
controlling costs. So anyway, Naveen, thank you for being here to present. We're ready for you.
Good evening, Chair Kopang, Deputy Mayor Honda, and members of the council. I'm here to present citywide adaptive traffic signal control, traffic control center authorization of contract expenditure increase. Policy question: should City Council authorize staff to increase the contract expenditure for the citywide adaptive traffic signal control, traffic control center contract? Background: an existing conference room was converted into a new traffic control center. It was determined that this conference room space was needed and an open space was available to convert it into a conference room. This work was not included in the original contract, but consistent with the scope of work of the contract. The contingency was not adequate to cover the cost of this work, but overall project budget, which is $3,675,000, has enough funds to cover the work. Contract estimated expenditures, citywide adaptive traffic signal control, traffic control center, original contract, which was approved by the council, was $109,907.61. Conference room replacement change order is $17,069.80 for a total cost of $126,977.41. Contract funding, previously approved funding, including contingency of the original contract, is $121,000. Expenditure increase request for conference room replacement is $6,000 for a total funding of $127,000. Options considered: authorize staff to increase the contract expenditures for the citywide adaptive traffic signal control, traffic control center contract. Option 2 would be do not authorize staff to increase the contract expenditure and provide direction to staff. Mayor's recommendation: the mayor recommends forwarding option 1 to the February 18, 2020 City Council consent agenda for approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Naveen, thank you for your presentation. Committee members, any questions? Council members, Councilmember Kochmar.
I'm just wondering where the conference room will be. Just curious.
It'll be on the other side of the planning, internal conference room. We took one conference room away to house the traffic control center where we would have all the cameras, all the monitors, everything watching.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to have a tour of it when it's done.
All right.
Just to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Unless there's any additional questions, do we have a motion?
Oh. I don't have it either.
Oh, that's right. I will make the motion, yes. I move to add okay, so basically a move to forward the, you have it? Oh, good, okay.
Can't go there.
Yeah, you can read it.
Thanks, TJ. I move to forward option 1 to the February 18th, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, motion carries unanimously. All right, Naveen, thank you.
Thank you.
We made it through that. And now, Bill Badino. Sarah, thank you for stopping by.
I was checking my text messages. Bill, are you coming?
You had me worried.
You're on TV. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I can watch up in the office. Stand by.
Good, so you just make the chair nervous. That's what your job is at this point, huh?
It's a nice
Okay.
thing to have these
I'm
committee
gonna have to
meetings
put you on
televised.
TV so we can watch where you are.
It's nice to have these committee meetings televised, right?
Yeah. All right,
Well, I am delighted to be here to continue to talk about two crucial issues. And first will be panhandling strategies.
okay,
And we've had a very informative month, been doing a lot of research. There's more, so as they say, many miles to go and promises to keep, but I'll walk you through a review of where we're at and then where we're going to keep going. So first of all, over the last few months, we've talked about reframing the discussion and about how education is as important as discussion, not only educating those who are there on the corners, but those who donate on the corners. We talked about 4 initiatives. One was maybe to scale back the signage, maybe not. Councilmember Kopang and I were in Lakewood, and we found out that the signs there are bigger than the ones that we were talking about, but I just conferred with EJ, and the price is still going to be the same, even if they're, what's that size again, 18 by 24? So, but those are the sizes we saw, and we had a side-by-side comparison we'll show you in a moment. And of course, these are the locations you'll be choosing from eventually. And then Initiative B, we've got cities that utilize social media and press releasing. Initiative C, working with nonprofits to maybe even more direct about having a place to donate versus a place of their own choice. And then the other initiative is continuing to research, and that's what we're going to talk about today, especially one key city. And of course, I believe where we all are now is we're moving more towards the center kind of sign or the sign on the right. The challenge with the sign on the left is, as you'll see in the pictures, when people see it, it looks like it says no panhandling, unless you read it carefully, when it's really about we're trying to reach those who are donating. And so I think that's why I'm starting to pick up groundswell that the center and the sign on the right is probably the better approach for, how to treat our citizens. And of course, so far, we're still researching. We're going to talk extensively about Lakewood, and Chair Kopang will also be sharing a lot on that. I'm getting information back from Walla Walla, and just to talk about them for a moment, we're making some follow-up questions, but in Walla Walla, they basically, for $20-ish, they supply signs to private property owners where there's panhandling. And then where they are at the exits and the entrances to the businesses, the signage is there discouraging, and it's more of a private property issue. And then, of course, the police assist with some drive-bys, and sometimes that's discouraging as well, too. And we'll have more information coming soon from Kennewick College Place, and then I've already talked to Bellevue, and we're getting pieces of their outreach program. Of course, as they say in Bellevue, they've got a very tuned-in community. Their city council meeting is watched. They really have this huge outreach program to have people not donate to panhandlers. And so, but I did see one the other Sunday. So, but looking particularly at Lakewood, you can see a couple police officers there on the left. Oh no, that's Mark. So, and basically we did a little tour. And Mark, if you want to interject, Councilmember Kopang, if you want to interject, we basically went with 2 police officers in 2 cars and basically looked at the signage. And you can see that there's a combination of signage. First of all, there's the contribute to the solution signage, and depending on the location, they have different sizes. But then also there's cooperation with the State Department of Transportation on the signage that's, with the state right-of-way. And I believe we don't have any of these signs up here in Federal Way on the signs. Would that be an accurate piece, EJ, that the sign on the right is something, or have I just not been noticing it due to sign clutter?
There's pedestrians, hitchhikers prohibited signs. I'm not sure about the bottom one. I'm not sure that's actually in Washington State based on the code I'm seeing.
Definitely not a state thing. It's citing an ordinance. So I don't know where that one on the right is from.
Yeah, but that's a Lakewood sign, so, anyway,
And that's a Lakewood, that's actually a DOT sign.
right. And there's another one that we shot a photograph
That was
of.
installed by DOT. Yeah,
Okay.
well, it's Pierce County. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so they're saying state, but it's King, so we'd have to look at the King County ordinance and see where they're at, so. So anyway, what they've done in Lakewood also is, first of all, they have set up two ordinances. First of all, pedestrian obstruction in roadways, and it's enforced by, would you say, Councilmember Kopang, they talked about a 4-person squad that was involved with this on a rotating basis. So that was the focus of their police department. And basically, you cannot interrupt or obstruct the movement of a vehicle by walking on, standing on, going into any roadway used for vehicle or bicycle travel, and contacting any vehicle, bicycle occupant therein, or halting the travel of such vehicle, bicycle, or occupant. So basically, once that was in place, you step off the curb, walk towards them, you get a warning. The second time, you get a ticket. The third time, where'd they say? They took them for a ride to
Nisqually.
Nisqually. So that is the approach in Lakewood. The other ordinance is a disorderly conduct, and this moves into the area where if someone obstructs vehicles, it's what we call aggressive kinds of panhandling. So with those two ordinances in place, and I have to take a look, I didn't have time to see where we're at on these pieces. They basically, the police aggressively contact these people. Then the signs are there. The signs are there to discourage citizens from not donating, but the signs do not say no panhandling. It says you got the state right-of-way signs for Pierce County, the others, but the signs are there as an aid for those who are there before the police can come back and contact them. Then also working with Bryn Grimley, the communications manager, we also have examples of their press releases. And of course, as you can see, just taking a brief look at this, you can see that they're talking about, we sympathize with those with hardships, but on the other hand, by giving to them, it causes, additional problems for the city, and you should focus your efforts on, and here's a blow-up of it. There's many charities and organizations. You don't know if this person has a legit need or not. Are they really homeless? Are the stories that they're talking about legitimate? And there are resources available. And then when they make contact with every single person on the corner, they hand out this booklet. It's not from the city of Lakewood, it's Pierce County, and it's put together with all sorts of resources for people in the county, and it's advertiser supported. So we'll make sure you get copies of that as we deliberate. So other pamphlets are provided. So basically the approach is there's the signage for the citizens, there's the PR campaign for the citizens, and that PR campaign, and we'll get you examples soon, Facebook, Twitter. In fact, the messages are pretty much right when the signs go up, this is what, we're putting these signs here, we sympathize, but we really need to not have, this kind of obstruction in the roadway. Please consider giving to those in need. And then there's a link to a website. Then the other posts that continue to follow up on Facebook and Twitter is, just these kinds of messages about panhandling intersections and how you should really focus your giving to a place that will really go to the people who really need it. So the city of Lakewood has followed it up, unrolled it, unveiled it with social media, and then they kept on doing it. And then we learned that signs can be too small. The one on the right is probably what we were contemplating. It's like your little parking sign, but this one is, so what's it, 18 by 24, EJ, the standard, the one on the left? So on a table, they look huge, but on a sign, when we were walking through the signs, they're actually, they're pretty small. So, and there's a few more examples there. But basically, when you speak about Lakewood, and you can chime in here too, Council Member Chair Kopang, it's the approach of the ordinance, the enforcement for those who are stepping off the curve, and then for the citizens, the signage at the point of contact, and then a campaign to discourage them before they even decide to do that. So let me give you a few more. I think I have a few other examples. No, that's pretty much it. So coming up is, we will get you, and I'll do this before the next meeting. I'm going to try to get ahead of the curve here so you have the latest information. What's going on in Walla Walla, and like I said, that's private property owners, and constantly the police are basically having them buy the $20 signs, and then they will know where they are, and then they will assist those stores in just sort of drive-bys. But I'm digging a little bit deeper to see what ordinances are there, if at all, compared to Lakewood. And then Bellevue's campaign, which I've seen a lot of it. It's pretty extensive, but they don't do the signage. But I would check. I would say there is police contact with these folks. And then, of course, the other two cities. But Chair Kopang, what's your observation of the trip? It was a great trip.
Want to thank Bill for setting up that trip. There was a few things that really stood out to me, and I think, beginning this conversation in the context of, we are not preventing panhandling, nor do we have any interest in preventing panhandling, nor are we interested in preventing people from giving to panhandlers. I think what we're really doing is trying to educate the public to the fact that there are other options. It was interesting, my observations in Lakewood were that there was not a lot of signs, but the signs that were there were effectively placed to create an understanding that panhandling was not, or that there was an option to giving to panhandlers. We did not see any panhandlers in Lakewood during our tour, which was informative, and it was a dry day, but another gray day in January, and we've had a lot of those. But they have said that their reduction they've observed in the time they've had this project in effect was 75%, and they said that was a conservative number. During our tour, we actually did get off the freeway at a Tacoma off-ramp, and we observed panhandlers at that location, which is just outside of the Lakewood city limits. So it was obvious to me that the signage has had some impact, but I think signage alone, without the education of the community to the options, and also I think having a commitment on the part of the police department to enforce the council ordinances. Though without those two, the education and the enforcement, I think the signs in and of themselves will not garner the kind of results that they've experienced with 75% reduction. So anyway, that was my observations. Committee members, certainly any questions you have for Bill or myself?
Councilmember,
Going to Lakewood?
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Chair Kopang. At some point, I would like to talk a little bit about the law as far as the ordinances that we're talking
Oh,
about.
of course.
Because we have talked extensively about these exact types of ordinances in the past, and Lakewood is probably going to get in trouble for some
Well,
of this stuff.
Lakewood, interestingly enough, did this in cooperation with the ACLU.
Yeah.
So that's, and again, this is, again, we, I think anything that we do obviously would have to pass legal muster.
Right.
So I think
And-
we're just, yeah.
If I may.
Yes, of course.
So one of the things is, and I don't know what their relation with the ACLU is, like skeptical, but maybe they work something out with them. But we can have laws in the books that are fine on their face, but are not fair as applied. So if the police or the city uses them exclusively for the end goal of prohibiting a constitutionally protected act, they can still sue us even though on its face, it's fine. It's just as applied. The only people we ever tell you can't walk in the street are homeless people. Then over time, when they develop that pattern, they can still sue us for the same problem. So that's what other jurisdictions have faced, and the ACLU frankly has been on point for those lawsuits.
I think one of the things that we've noticed, I think this has been pretty extensively commented on, is jaywalking in our community. And I think that that would fit under this as well. In fact, we're obstructing traffic by jaywalking. So there's more than one issue or one behavior that would be potentially addressed in anything related to this. So I think the obstruction of the traffic is.
The one last point I would make is that at council's direction, we have drafted and are going to be presenting, I believe through the safety, through parks, not through LUTC, a proposed ordinance to update our obstruction language. So basically, it's, if you take out a lot of the aggressive stuff that you've seen in Lakewood, and it talks directly just about blocking traffic and jaywalking and being in the roadway and interfering with traffic, that's the language that will be presented to council. So we will have a similar ordinance on the books.
Good. Sounds like we're approaching this from multiple angles. Thank you. Any additional questions? Councilmember Trenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bill and Chair Copan, thank you for your presentation on this one. My question is very similar to what Brian was saying. Basically, I want to ask if has anyone or any organization challenged Lakewood ordinances, and what's the outcome of it?
Not these ones at this point, but Lakewood was challenged, I believe, by the Washington Supreme Court when they were just saying no panhandling. So then they modified their approach to this. And so at this point, there's been no challenge.
And they did that in coordination with the ACLU.
So
what they've done now is, as they told us, in coordination with the ACLU. They didn't approve the signs, but they approved the ordinance.
Language for the ordinance,
Bill and Chair Copain, and I apologize if you're not complete with that question, but talk about what does that exactly mean in coordination with the LCU? Do you guys have details of what that means? It's kind of vague.
What we were told is they shared the language of the ordinance with the ACLU, and there were no objections.
Accepted it, yeah.
And why is that significant?
They're the principal. The ACLU is the principal plaintiff that goes after cities for violating people's constitutional rights. So they're the most likely ones to sue you.
So the fact that there is a coordination and partnership with the ACLU, that potentially cut the problem that the city could be faced with. Eliminated.
I don't think it's fair to characterize it as partnership. I think that they just said, we don't object to the language of your ordinance. There's still the equal protection as applied problem.
Yes.
So if they use this law, even though it's fair on its face, and I agree that it is, but if they use it to target a specific type of person, they're still gonna get sued by the ACLU. So it's a fine line.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of education and restraint from the police.
So as we ventured into this area, trust but verify.
So if we ever get to the arena and working with our legal department, I mean, we could theoretically knock on the ACLU door and just say, hey, take that same approach as what Lakewood has done. I mean, we could potentially do that.
We could. I've already drafted the language, and we're going to present it, and it's very similar to the language that Lakewood has already passed. So
Very good.
I hadn't read Lakewood's yet, but it's basically, if you read the case law on point for this is kind of the inevitable conclusion, that you have to address misconduct and not speech.
Yeah, and Ryan, thank you for giving us a heads up. That's headed to the Parks and Human Services Public Safety Committee, and I would encourage that the chair maybe have it as a motion to add it to the business portion of the agenda when the time comes.
Will it be an ordinance, so.
Oh, so it'll already be in the business. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. I'm interested in how Pierce County can put signs on the off-ramps on the freeway. And if they can, why King County hasn't taken that same initiative. I'm also, if I heard you right,
Deputy Mayor Honda, I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify, the state DOT put those signs up. The county did not. It's on right away, so it's the Department of, the DOT was the one that put those signs up.
That's what we were told, so
But
we can
the-
verify that.
The authority to put the signs up was derived from an action by the county,
by Pierce County.
according to the ordinance that was cited on the sign.
Okay.
So I guess if King
Okay.
County's taken a similar action, then maybe we could
Okay, well-
ask them to do that as well.
I'll find out, Deputy
Clarification.
Mayor.
Yeah.
Also, if I heard you right, Bill, you said that the first time someone would be cited, and then the second time taken to Nisqually, which is a jail, for panhandling. Is that correct?
No, what we were told, and of course we'll verify this, is first time there would be a warning, second time there would be a ticket, correct, Councilmember? And then third time would be possible transportation
To jail.
to jail.
So I
But-
would rather that we put people in jail that were doing violent crimes and not, this is not a violent crime in most cases. Some cases it could be construed if someone feels very threatened, but that concerns me. And I would be concerned that we would move people off of some areas where they're panhandling now, they'd go to more private property in Federal Way to panhandle, where these signs would not be placed. And then we put an additional burden on our business owners. So I would like a plan in place to handle that, because that, we already have a lot of panhandlers on private businesses where this doesn't apply, and I don't want to burden.
I think that's a great suggestion.
That's a great
Deputy Mayor.
suggestion. And as I delve deeper in my Q&A back and forth with the captain at Walla Walla, they're private property almost exclusively.
Yeah.
And so we'll get more insight with
And
that.
one of the things that Lakewood did to address that particular issue was to basically let the businesses know where they're purchasing the sign, so if they want to buy the same sign, they're welcome to do so. But Lakewood made the decision, I think it's probably one we'd support, that we were not going to get in the business of selling signs. So,
My other concern is, we asked our police chief to enforce the no jaywalking ordinance that we have. And that isn't being done. And so if we're not going to enforce the no jaywalking, I'm concerned about enforcing this without, as Ryan has mentioned, because I think jaywalking is certainly, especially up on 320th, between Safeway and the apartment complex, is certainly an issue that, you know, if someone slams on their brakes because someone's jaywalking, they're going to be rear-ended, possibly, more than likely, and it could be several cars involved. So if it's going to be enforced for panhandling, it would have to be enforced for jaywalking.
absolutely.
Can I, just one point?
Of course.
Jaywalking has to be observed by an officer while it's happening to
Yes.
write a ticket for it. So the one difference between this and jaywalking is they're pretty static. They're usually there when you show up, and that you have to kind of catch them in the act for jaywalking. So we all observe it on occasion, but I'm not sure if officers ignore it when they see it. It's just, you have to catch them, so.
I would be interested to know if we've written tickets for jaywalking, then we would have enforced it.
I can follow up.
Apparently, we haven't. We asked that
Yeah,
question.
okay, very good. All right.
One quick note, I was out early in the morning putting out state of the city signs, and I noticed for the first time that Winco has no panhandling and then keep the change signs. But apparently a private property owner can, prohibit it because it's private property.
Yes.
So the signs for private property would be different from those that we would have in the city. So,
And people stand right underneath those signs and panhandle, so it hasn't stopped.
yeah.
And I think, to the Deputy Mayor's point, I think it's fair, and that's, it has to be a coordinated effort coming from different angles. And we can't just place the sign there. It has to be several folds, like Chair Copain and Bill Vadino have shared with us that the city of Lakewood is doing. But you're absolutely right, Deputy Mayor. I mean, I definitely see people under that sign, if I'm thinking correctly and where it's exactly stated, so.
Yeah, I saw two, so
Yeah.
it's probably 3, 4.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, if Winco decides that they don't want panhandlers there and they want to do something more than a sign, then they're going to make that decision. But that's certainly as private property. I think anything that doesn't get enforced will be ignored, absolutely. Councilmember Safadas.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation, and I know.
You're welcome.
Martin and I have had this conversation for over a year, I'd say, going back and forth, and I've always been concerned about someone telling me what to do with my change or with my money. I think this language is more palatable for me because okay, two things. One is a lot of people believe all panhandlers are homeless population when that's not the case. And so I think that's one concern I've always had because the homeless population is blamed for panhandling as a whole. But also, if we're going to allow or if we're going to have businesses take care of their properties, then I think I'm concerned about a litter of no panhandling signs all over the place. So I don't know how we can manage that, whether it be distance restriction or, I don't know, but I think that's something that should be really addressed. And then to Deputy Mayor's concern, I think if and when we're ready to do this, that all signs be ready to go up basically at the same time, so we don't have that differentiation of where I can't panhandle here, but I can surely do it over here kind of mentality. So I think that really should be put into consideration also as we're moving forward with this. And yeah, but like I said, I've always been concerned, and I've shared, I mean, yeah, we've gone back and forth a lot. So I'm glad to see it, and I like the language. This is much more
Palatable?
and compassionate than how it was, I had first heard it. So I do appreciate this, and thank you very much. And I do completely support what Deputy Mayor said about putting people in prison also for not committing a violent crime or crime that otherwise leads to, they're not stealing, they're just asking. So I think making sure that we are very clear about the distinction there is good.
Thank you, Councilmember Safadas. I just wanted to clarify one point. There will be no signs in Federal Way prohibiting panhandling. None. There'll be informative signs saying if you're concerned about this, you can give elsewhere. So,
And
okay, yeah, I
Chair
just wanted to
Copain,
make sure.
also, just to add to what you're saying, there will be no arrests for panhandling either. So no one's going to jail because they're panhandling.
Right.
No. I mean, the conversation around what happens at Lakewood.
Yeah, and they're not arresting people in Lakewood
Right.
for panhandling
No, they're
either.
not.
It's for other behaviors.
Obstruction of,
Yeah,
associated
obstruction of
with-
traffic,
there you go.
Right.
yeah.
So it's,
But
it's an
Which leads
important,
to, yeah.
it's a very important distinction.
Very important
because
distinction,
It's, one
yes.
is unconstitutional.
And I think, if I may, I think Councilor Safadas, you have a good point, and of course, the Deputy Mayor has stated as well, which is maybe for us, and I think for us, maybe we don't take that strategy of arresting people for obstruction of getting in people's way, the obstruction of traffic, I think is what I'm looking for. And I think that's what I'm kind of hearing you say. And if, I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit here, and that's, and this is more of a comment, so no question for you, Bill, but, you know, I know that I've conversed with Councilmember Safadas on this several times. I've gone to Councilmember Tran's office, and DSHS office, and we've talked, and we've gone to Panera Bread, we've talked about this issue as well, and it certainly has been an issue of passion because it stems from the community's desire to resolve this issue as best as one can legally do. And I think it's an issue that all of us hear consistently for several years, and it's my personal belief, and I'm sure you guys can share in this, and that's let's resolve issues. That's why we're up here, is to solve those issues and partnerships. And I think, you know, for me, it's interesting how this has begun from we don't want any panhandlers to the signage. And I think it just shows to you that the partnership, the research, the discussions, the questions all walked us towards a possible solution. And so I appreciate the questions that are being asked. I appreciate the openness that my colleagues have put forth. This is an issue, and I think it can be resolvable from the perspective of obstruction of traffic. And I think that's a good lens to look at it. And I think it's important, you know, as much as I concur with Deputy Mayor's concerns about maybe the third, we don't arrest due to obstruction of traffic, but, you know, I think it's also important for it to be noted that if someone breaks the law, accountability has to be taken into account. And so, but at the same time, you know, I think we can certainly agree, and I can certainly agree on the fact that there's probably other reasons why people should go to jail, maybe not this. And so I understand that and whatnot. And that's just a comment that kind of came to a thought that came to my head as the Deputy Mayor was inferring about that. And so I do want to thank Councilor Chair Copane. I know that him and I have discussed this, and he saw that the importance of it, and really was the only councilor that really kind of thrusted this forward with our partnership. And so thank you for that. That really means the world to me, because I think it's really important that people hear that we're trying to walk in the direction of what their concerns are. And Bill, thank you for your research on this. I can't wait till I go to Walla Walla with you to, no, never mind, you're not going to Walla Walla for this.
We're not going to Walla Walla.
But thank you for your research and dedication on this. And I'm still hopeful, and I'm optimistic that the mayor will turn around his opinion of this. This is a prime example of the council really taking the lead effort on this policy that stems from here, not the executive branch of the mayor's office. And so I'm really proud of the city council. So thank you to my colleagues, and thank you for Bill for your time on this, and Mark for your leadership on this. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Honda, you had additional comment?
I do. So if the person asking for money steps off the sidewalk, is given money, steps back, is that an obstruction of traffic? Ryan?
It could be. Obstruction requires an intentional act, an intent to obstruct traffic. So it's not an easy thing to prove. You'd have to ask the guy, you know, what were you doing? If it's, a lot of times there's something about the physical act of going to the street that looks like they're trying to obstruct traffic, you know, taking their time, looking right at a car. There would need to be something in the police report to indicate their mental state, because criminal acts require what they call mens rea, a criminal intent. So that would be the difference. It's not just you're in the street, so you violated the law automatically. It's not an easy thing to prove.
So would a police officer have to observe the person doing this?
Yes. All misdemeanors have to be observed by the officer, basically, except for unless there's a witness or something.
Well, I guess we'd need a willing police department who is willing to do this. And we'd have to have police officers in the right spot at the right time for it to work. You know, I don't think it's going to be as easy as it sounds. And
No. Well,
I think it'll be very frustrating for some people who expect the signs to go up and the panhandlers to disappear. I would make an assumption that if the signs go up and no one is cited because our officers aren't there to see that action take place, then we probably won't lose panhandlers from those sites. That would be my guess, but
Yeah.
it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate your concerns, and I think Deputy Mayor Honda, you bring up a very good point. If this is not, if obstruction is not enforced, you know, you're not going to see, I mean, the signs themselves will not solve the problem. It's going to take a coordinated effort both in education, which is a key component of Lakewood's process, and obviously yielded a 75% reduction based on their own numbers, and they said those were conservative. But again, it was a coordinated effort. Councilmember Sefa Dawson, then the Councilmember Kochmar.
And I think one thing that I did not hear is that they could be ticketed.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Warning, ticket.
Warning,
And
ticket.
then Lakewood
Transportation.
chooses to put them in jail for the night. Yes. Councilmember Kochmar.
Well, from my point of view, it's about time we did something, and I
Yes.
appreciate that.
Yes.
So I'm not looking at this from the rights of the panhandler. I'm looking at this from informing the public and making them feel it's okay not to give to the panhandler, because it'll tug at your heartstrings. You think that you should, but the sign says, give it to a local charity. I like that much better, and make sure that we educate them where to give and how to give. And it's easy online. So I think we have to change what's going on in our community, and I'm glad that we're taking some steps to do that, and so thank you.
Well, appreciate that, and I could certainly agree with you, Councilmember Kochmar, that doing nothing is, I think, is no longer an option for us if we're going to be responsive to the public in addressing the issues that we see occurring. So, thank you. Councilmember Moore, did you
Yeah.
want to add any more to this?
So, Bill and Chair Copain, so if a police officer drove by and saw a panhandler, they would essentially stop and just connect with them and talk with them, correct?
Unless they're otherwise assigned. That unit, that group of 4 officers was partially dedicated to that, even in undercover cars.
I think community outreach is already a component of the Federal Way
Yes.
Police Department's efforts, so.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm just saying that.
Yeah,
but
so
the-
that, and part of that community outreach is, talking to,
Yeah, they're already doing that.
yeah, they're already doing that.
So that would be, yes, that they would stop, connect with the person in a compassionate type of way, and educate them, right?
They certainly could,
Yes,
That they could. Lakewood's devoted a team to it.
yeah.
got it.
Yeah,
So,
again,
okay.
it's about, we can cite policy all day long, but unless it's enforced. Yeah. Okay, Councilmember Tran?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern, if we are going to do this, how is this going to impact police personnel? As you know, our police force already spread out too thin. We are asking them to do one more thing. And how is that going to impact their workload?
Right.
So that's my
Exactly.
concern.
Yeah, no, I think that's a legitimate concern. It's something I've talked to the chief about. I think the chief is actually supportive of putting signs up. So he understands the implications. But I think that there's also an argument, it's kind of like the broken window argument. It's like if you address the broken windows, then the neighborhood doesn't decline. It doesn't decline. And I think the same would be, this is one of those things that's almost equivalent to a broken window. Basically, the less panhandling, the less petty crime, the less, not that they're associated necessarily, but they do tend to, I think, they tend to be somewhat associated. So I think there's a lot of law-abiding panhandlers, so I'm not saying that panhandling is certainly not illegal in a space, but anyway.
And didn't the police chief and the public works director work together in identifying these locations as a suggestion for the signage to be placed at? Wasn't that my understanding?
It wasn't the chief, it was the police department, yes.
So it was the
And it
police-
was at council's direction,
Right.
if we were going to do this, where would suggestions be? That was where this list came from, not a recommendation of where to put them as much as if council's direction is to install them, where would, based on what we know both from Public Works and from police's side, where do we see this the most? And it would be the logical places based on council's direction of what the request was to put them.
There's basically 5 locations with 4 signs at each location for a total of 20 signs.
Yeah, that was what we had suggested as a pilot, and then go from there. And then I think there was conversations with council about both upscaling that to more as well as reducing it down to a lower number. And
again,
it's purely a
We're looking at about
policy.
$500 per sign, so we're looking at about,
Yeah, it was like 495 or
Yeah, so
496,
basically about
but round numbers,
$10,000.
500 per sign.
so there's a cost associated with it. And then
Absolutely.
obviously, there's enforcement, there's, this is not just a casual, let's put a sign up and solve the problem. There's more to it than that, but I think it's a good discussion for us to have. This discussion certainly is not over. I think we still have more research to do, but I think we've, having I think one of the questions that we invariably hear with these types of discussions is what are other cities doing? And I think in this case, we have Lakewood as an example of a city that implemented a policy that was coordinated with the police department, incorporated signs in education, both media and printed, along with a solutions book or a provider book. So again, coordinated effort that has resulted in a 75% reduction in panhandling, which was the outcome that they desired. Well, I think they desired, they wanted to see less panhandling, but they also wanted to see less obstruction of traffic. So, one follows the other, but again, we're not going to directly discourage panhandling. We're going to encourage people to understand that there's other options to giving to panhandlers. Okay, all right. Any other discussion before we move on to next issue? Okay, council, thank you for your time and energy and interest in this subject. Second issue is a progress report on airport issues.
So in brief, and Councilmember Sefadasan will help as well too, things are basically continuing this month. Of course, the commerce study is almost completed, and basically that is a look at the data that exists on the effects of SeaTac Airport on the 6 communities and the communities to the south since the third runway. And so the data collection is almost done. And basically what it's going to give us, the 6 cities, is a baseline to look at strategies for the next steps, a path forward, and then there'll be an analysis of not only what research has been done and exists, but what research has to be done, much like ultrafine particles harm versus the fact that there are ultrafine. We know there's ultrafine. There needs to be a study to show the harm of ultrafine. So it may be ready to inform the end of the legislative session, because as you'll see when we talk about next, the federal and the state agenda is Mike Pelliciotti has passed the bill in the House to expand the mitigation for sound, people who are harmed by sound, into federal way. And I've got to look at the bill, but I believe it's now gone out 13 miles, so it affects Tacoma. You heard and felt the 747s that were flying over us at the council retreat, so that's the path there as well too. Their citing of a second airport committee continues to meet, and then Tina Arwal has dropped, and they'll be discussing the bill to repair the homes that had the sound packages installed in the 3 miles from the airport through Burien and Des Moines and those other cities. Those companies no longer exist. the warranties, they've expired, and now they're going back. And we've been told that the port is in support of that bill. They're concerned, the port is concerned, however, about the Pellicciati bill. And so I would anticipate, we'll see what happens in the Senate, but they're talking that would be a lot of money. But Councilmember Cepheus and we were there, and basically, they're saying it's going to be Carl Sagan billions and billions, but a right still has to be mitigated. So, and I think a bill may drop about ultrafine particles Part 2, but I've got to verify that as well too. So that's the state initiatives, and then of course, as far as the START status goes, there's been 2 meetings now, and basically these items are on the agenda, and basically there's a give and take, and so the port's been asked to respond of these concerns, what are they willing to work with the group on, the reasons why, the 3 cities withdrew. And Normandy Park has a new council member as well too, and that could tip the scale at Normandy Park as well. So we'll see what happens there. But basically, you see it's sort of like an upside down pyramid. There's how the meetings are set and agendas are set, and how there's some basic norms that I think everybody will agree on, that, it's a joint meeting, joint agendas, materials in advance, a partnership for the meetings versus the perception that the port was saying, well, here's the agenda, here's everything. Though the port, will rightfully say, and they're watching us on television right now, they'll say, well, no, we for the most part, we did do those things. So we're working together on those issues, and then, of course, we'll see what they say about, the bigger issues, which was the SAMP environmental design work, and how that happened, and then recording of the meetings may be an interesting point as well, too. So, and then those were more or less discussed at the Highline Forum, too. So any questions about that? So, and then Councilmember Cepheus, we had another great Highline Forum, and what's interesting about that is there's a proposal to have START become part of the Highline Forum, but there's also a contention that because the school district is there and the college is there, there's so much to do, and some of you have, all of you have attended that Highline Forum, that maybe START reports to that to get transmitted to the port, to the port board, the port commission, but maybe that stays, and you've all worked with the Highline Forum for years, so, but that was one idea. But no, the Highline Forum was basically legislative agendas, and they took all our legislative agendas and blended them together so we would all be united with the port on many of the commonalities. And when that grid comes out, we'll send it out to you so you can see how all the cities sort of blend and agree. But Councilmember Cepheus, any other observations?
I think you covered it all, and especially I was kind of curious about the legislative agendas, priorities, to see how they would have the unified voice. So when they compile it, it'd be very interesting to see.
Yeah, we'll send that out special to
Yeah.
council when that comes out. And then once we have a little bit more information on the Pellicciati bill, because I believe it reaches beyond federal way, which is I think wonderful. So.
Right. And then we're going to host the Highline Forum here in May, so if you can attend at least that one, I think it'll be great.
Yeah.
Or is it confirmed, by the way? It wasn't on their calendar for May. Have they put it on there?
We're on the calendar
Okay.
for May.
All right.
It wasn't quite on the agenda, but they were saying, oh, no, it's on the calendar. We're coming to Federal Way. And we get to do, we have a portion of the agenda to talk about Federal Way.
Yeah, okay.
And it'll be in these council chambers. I think it's the Wednesday before Memorial Day.
So,
Other than that,
thank
any
you.
questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Honda.
Is there any need for council members to go to Olympia to testify on any of these issues?
I would say yes.
Could you
and
let us know?
I will let you know what the schedule is. Sometimes they come up really fast.
Right.
As Representative Kochmar will tell you, sometimes they're just posted, the afternoon the day before.
Okay.
So there was one about the packages in Des Moines and SeaTac, Normandy Park, that bill. But apparently the Pellicciati bill just sailed through. So I would say the Senate hearings will be key, and of course, we'll be mobilizing all of our very active citizens you know, the
Yes.
Green Hills Group and the other groups for them to be involved as well, too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bill, I think the deputy mayor brings up a great point, though, and I think that rapid deployment, where possible through communication, proactive communication is going to be essential for us. So appreciate your continued vigilance in monitoring what's going on with the legislature and being able to let us know. I know our consultant, Aaron Flygar, is looking at these things too and can certainly communicate with us as well. But
He's poised to let us know when
Yeah.
something relevant comes up.
yeah, that's good news. But again, I think that, which council member can go, I think that's really subject to each one of us and our availability at any one time. But I think that, for any one of us to be able to go and testify, I think, and be prepared is good. So I know that if we were called on, that you would have all the preparation we needed to be able to be intelligent in our comments and effective in doing so. So thank you for that in
You're welcome.
advance.
Well, you generally have 1 minute, sometimes 2 if you're lucky.
Okay,
Let's go.
very good.
Presence is
So
everything, isn't it?
Talk fast, okay, and be on point.
And arrive very early,
And
so you
arrive
can
early.
sign in.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, they're not as flexible as we are they? Yeah. Okay, which for all the right reasons. Bill, I thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I think certainly reflects, I think, the interest of the council in responding to the community and their interest in being as proactive in addressing the Port of Seattle issues as they come up. So thank you for that.
And as a note, Bernadine Lund is on a conference call, otherwise she'd be here giving you
Okay, yeah.
pieces of this update as well.
Yeah, I
A lot of
noticed,
our involved citizens,
Bernadine,
Dave Berger, et cetera.
Yeah, Bernadine has continued to remain very active. I see her out walking her dogs, and actually, Marina Hills has a newsletter, and she was published in that newsletter this last month. So
There we go.
thankful for her involvement, as well as so many of the other members of our community that have made this an issue of interest to them. I think we have a lot of people that are subject matter experts and have become subject matter experts and been able to support the city's efforts in addressing the airport concerns. So our continued partnership with them is, I think, goes without saying, is something that we want to see continue. So anyway, thank you for that presentation. Unless there's any other questions or comments for the good of the order, I would move that we adjourn. All right, hearing none. We are adjourned. The next Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting will be the first Monday in March, right here at City Council chambers. So thank you.